Number 10. Waiting to feel motivated before acting. You keep telling yourself a quiet lie, and it sounds reasonable enough that you never question it. I'll start when I feel motivated. It feels mature, responsible, like you're respecting your mental state. But what you're actually doing is teaching your brain a dangerous lesson. Action requires permission from emotion, and motivation, as your brain is learning, is optional. Here's what's really happening beneath the surface. Motivation is not a fuel source. It's a reward chemical released after movement begins. But when you wait for it first, your brain flips the order. It learns that inaction is the default, and action is an exception that must be justified by a feeling. Over time, your nervous system stops generating internal drive altogether. Why would it? You've trained it that effort is pointless unless motivation magically appears. This is how helplessness is quietly rehearsed. Each time you delay action until you feel ready, your brain logs the delay as evidence that you are not the type of person who initiates. Dopamine circuits weaken. Frontal control hands power to mood centers. You don't feel lazy, you feel stuck. And stuck feels safer than moving without guarantees. The cruel part is this: the longer you wait, the less motivation shows up. Not because you're broken, but because your brain adapts to the rules you set. You taught it that discomfort is a stop sign, not a signal. So it protects you by reducing initiative altogether. Motivation doesn't come to rescue action. Action creates motivation. And every time you reverse that order, you quietly vote for a smaller life, one where movement waits for permission that never arrives. When you finally act without feeling ready, your brain relearns something powerful. You are not your mood. And that lesson alone begins to undo helplessness at the root. Number 9. Avoiding effort unless outcomes are guaranteed. You tell yourself you're being smart, careful, strategic. I'll try when I know it will work. On the surface, that sounds like wisdom, but underneath, your brain is absorbing a quieter message. Effort is dangerous unless success is guaranteed. And once that rule settles in, growth quietly shuts down. Your brain does not interpret this as planning. It interprets it as avoidance with justification. Each time you refuse to act without certainty, your nervous system learns that uncertainty equals threat. The prediction circuits tighten. Risk sensitivity spikes. You begin to experience effort itself as stress, not challenge. And stress is something the brain is designed to minimize, not explore. This is where learned helplessness starts wearing a suit and calling itself intelligence. You stop experimenting. You stop practicing. You stop tolerating being bad at something long enough to become good at it. Instead, you wait for perfect conditions, perfect timing, perfect odds. Your brain records the waiting as proof that you are incapable without external safety nets. What's devastating is that guaranteed outcomes never exist. So your brain learns a deeper rule. Most actions are not worth taking. Slowly, decisiveness erodes. Initiative weakens. You don't fail often, but only because you rarely begin. And not failing starts to feel like success. But the brain only rewires through exposure. Confidence is not built by correct outcomes. It's built by surviving imperfect ones. When you act without guarantees, your nervous system learns resilience. When you don't, it learns fragility. Avoiding effort doesn't protect your intelligence. It trains your brain to fear its own potential. And once effort feels unsafe, even easy actions start to feel heavy. That's not caution, that's conditioning. And it's teaching you to shrink without ever realizing why. Number 8. Asking others what you should do. It starts harmlessly. What do you think I should do? You call it being open-minded, collaborative, responsible. But your brain hears something else every time you outsource that choice. I don't trust myself to decide. And repetition turns that doubt into structure. Your brain is a prediction machine. It learns who is in charge by watching where decisions come from. When choices consistently come from outside voices, your internal decision circuitry weakens. Not dramatically, quietly. You still have opinions, but they arrive softer. Later, already unsure. Initiative doesn't disappear. It hesitates until someone else confirms it's allowed. This is how agency erodes without pain. You stop asking yourself what you want and start scanning for consensus. Advice becomes a substitute for clarity. Guidance replaces commitment. And the brain logs each external answer as evidence that thinking alone is unsafe. The more you ask, the less confident your own signal becomes. What makes this trap convincing is that advice often helps in the short term. Decisions feel lighter. Responsibility feels shared. But neurologically, your brain is learning dependency. Decision-making muscles atrophy without resistance. Eventually, even small choices feel overwhelming, quote, not because they're complex, but because you've trained your mind to wait for permission. Here's the deeper cost. When outcomes go wrong, your brain learns that failure wasn't yours, but success wasn't either. Ownership dissolves. And without ownership, motivation collapses. Why push hard for something you didn't choose? Guidance should refine your direction, not replace it. When you decide first and consult second, your brain learns confidence through use. When you reverse that order, you quietly teach it helplessness dressed as humility. The moment you choose without asking, discomfort spikes, and strength begins returning. Number 7. Dropping goals. When progress slows. At first you were excited, focused, certain this time was different. Then progress slowed. Not stopped, just slowed. And something inside you quietly whispered, maybe this isn't meant for me. That whisper feels intuitive, almost wise. But your brain is learning something far more damaging. Slow progress means wrong path. Your nervous system doesn't measure growth the way reality does. It measures momentum. Early gains release dopamine fast, so the brain associates effort with reward. But when improvement becomes incremental, as it always does, the reward signal weakens. If you abandon the goal at that moment, your brain draws a sharp conclusion. Sustained effort is unsafe and unrewarding. This is how goals stop being commitments and start becoming emotional contracts. As long as things feel good, you stay. The moment resistance appears, you interpret friction as feedback about your ability. Not about the process, not about time, about you. And that interpretation rewires identity. Each abandoned goal becomes a data point, not consciously, neurologically. The brain stores it as proof that you don't persist through plateaus. So next time, motivation fades sooner. Doubt arrives earlier. The quitting impulse feels more reasonable. What you call self-awareness is often just pattern reinforcement. The tragedy is that plateaus are not warnings. They are adaptation zones, the exact phase where skills consolidate and capacity expands beneath the surface. But when you leave early, your brain never experiences the breakthrough. It never learns that boredom, slowness, and uncertainty are survivable. Over time, you don't just quit goals, you stop setting ambitious ones. Why invite disappointment when withdrawal feels cleaner? But every time you stay through the slow part, your brain updates its beliefs. It learns that progress doesn't need drama, that growth can be quiet, that you are capable of continuing without applause. And that lesson alone weakens helplessness at its core. Number 6. Seeking reassurance instead of results. At some point, effort stopped being the thing that calmed you. Reassurance replaced it. You don't ask, what should I do next? You ask, do you think this is okay? Not to improve the outcome, but to quiet the anxiety. And every time reassurance works, your brain learns a dangerous shortcut. Relief is better than progress. Reassurance feels productive because it reduces discomfort instantly. Someone says, you're doing fine, and the tension dissolves. But your brain doesn't register that as support. It registers it as completion. The stress signal shuts off without any action taken. Over time, your nervous system stops associating calm with movement and starts associating calm with approval. This subtly rewires motivation. Why push forward when validation already delivers the emotional reward? Why risk effort when reassurance offers certainty? Your brain begins to treat results as optional because the feeling you were supposed to earn through progress is now available on demand through words. Here's the trap. Reassurance decays quickly. The relief never lasts, so you need it again and again. Each cycle teaches your brain that confidence comes from outside confirmation, not internal evidence. Self-trust erodes. Action hesitation increases. Eventually, even starting feels irresponsible without someone else agreeing first. What's worse is that reassurance doesn't build resilience. It builds dependence. When reassurance is absent, anxiety spikes harder than before. Your brain never learned how to calm itself through competence, only through comfort. Results work differently. They calm the brain after effort, not before. They create durable confidence because they leave evidence behind. When you shift from asking for reassurance to producing outcomes, discomfort rises briefly and then shrinks permanently. Your brain doesn't need to be told you're capable. It needs proof. Number 5. Letting mood decide action. Most days, you don't consciously choose to stop. You check how you feel. If the mood is low, you wait. If the energy isn't there, you postpone. It feels humane, self-aware. But your brain is learning a subtle rule that slowly dismantles your power. Action is conditional on emotion. Moods were never designed to be leaders. They are weather patterns, temporary, reactive, biased by sleep, food, memory, and stress. But when you let mood decide action, your brain rewires authority away from intention and toward sensation. The emotional system takes the wheel, and the rational system becomes a negotiator instead of a commander. At first, this feels gentle. You're listening to yourself, but neurologically, something else is happening. Each time you delay because you don't feel like it, your brain associates low mood with avoidance relief. The discomfort fades, not because the problem is solved, but because action was canceled. And the brain remembers that. It always remembers what reduces pain fastest. Over time, moods become louder, not weaker. Your tolerance for acting through emotional friction shrinks. Small dips feel like valid reasons to stop. Neutral days feel unproductive. You start believing that productive people simply feel better than you. That's helplessness sneaking in through misinterpretation. Here's the truth your brain never learned. Mood follows action far more reliably than action follows mood. Movement stabilizes emotion. Structure calms anxiety. Progress lifts fog. But when you wait to feel good first, your brain never gets the evidence. It concludes that feeling bad means being incapable. The shift is uncomfortable at first. Acting while unmotivated feels wrong. But that discomfort is authority returning. Each time you act without consulting your mood, your brain updates its model of you. Not as someone who feels good and then moves, but as someone who moves and becomes good. That identity change is small, quiet, and devastating to helplessness. Number 4. Confusing comfort with safety. Your brain loves comfort and it has learned to call it safety. Warm routines, familiar people, predictable days. Nothing wrong happens there. And that's exactly the problem. Over time, your brain begins to merge two very different ideas into one. What feels comfortable must be what keeps me safe. Neurologically, comfort is just low stimulation. Safety is the absence of real threat. But when you repeatedly avoid discomfort, your brain stops making that distinction. Novelty triggers stress. Challenge feels dangerous. Growth registers as risk. And the longer you stay comfortable, the smaller your definition of safe becomes. This is how helplessness disguises itself as self-care. You stop doing things not because they're harmful, but because they're unfamiliar. You avoid conversations, opportunities, responsibilities, not consciously, but instinctively. Your brain isn't protecting you from danger anymore. It's protecting you from uncertainty. The cruel irony is that excessive comfort weakens the very systems meant to keep you safe. Confidence decays without use. Adaptability fades. When real challenges appear, your nervous system panics faster because it hasn't been trained gradually. You don't feel brave, you feel fragile. Comfort doesn't prepare you for stress. Exposure does. Small discomforts expand your tolerance. They teach your brain that unease is survivable, that effort doesn't equal threat, that you can move forward without everything feeling calm first. When you confuse comfort with safety, your world shrinks quietly. When you separate them, something powerful happens. Discomfort stops feeling like danger and starts feeling like information. And the moment your brain relearns that difference, helplessness loses one of its favorite hiding places. Number 3. Letting small failures define capability. The moment something goes wrong, your brain rushes to explain it. Not the event, you. A missed deadline becomes, I'm bad with consistency. One awkward conversation turns into, I'm not good with people. These conclusions feel efficient, even honest. But your brain is learning a brutal shortcut. Small failure equals fixed limitation. This happens because the brain hates uncertainty more than it hates negativity. It would rather lock in a painful story than sit with ambiguity. So, instead of treating failure as feedback about a method, a moment, or a variable, it compresses everything into identity. The relief is immediate, the cost is permanent. Each time you do this, your brain updates its internal map of what's not for you. Territory shrinks, curiosity fades. You stop experimenting because you already know how this ends, not because you've tested it thoroughly, but because one data point felt convincing enough. Helplessness thrives on these premature conclusions. What makes this pattern dangerous is how logical it sounds. You're not being dramatic, you're being realistic. But realism without repetition is just fear wearing analysis. Skill is statistical. Capability emerges from patterns, not incidents. When your brain never gathers enough data, it assumes the worst by default. Over time, your self-image hardens. You stop saying that didn't work and start saying I can't. And once ability feels fixed, effort feels pointless. Why try harder if the limit is already defined? The antidote isn't blind optimism, it's precision. Separating outcome from identity. Treating failure as information, not a verdict. Every time you do that, your brain relearns flexibility. It learns that ability grows through contact, not conclusions. The moment small failures stop defining you, progress becomes possible again. Not because you're suddenly confident, but because you're no longer condemned by one imperfect moment. Number 2. Outsourcing decisions constantly. At some point, choice stopped feeling like freedom and started feeling like weight. So you began handing it off. Algorithms choose what you watch. Notifications decide what matters. Schedules, opinions, systems, experts. Someone else always knows better. It feels efficient, but your brain is learning a quiet rule that rewires helplessness deeply. Decisions are safer when they aren't mine. Decision-making is not just a skill, it's a neurological authority structure. When you repeatedly outsource choices, your brain downgrades its own role. The prefrontal circuits responsible for judgment and commitment weaken from disuse, while external cues grow louder and more trusted. You don't feel incapable. You you feel relieved, and relief is a powerful teacher. Each avoided decision reduces immediate anxiety, but the brain logs that relief as success. Over time, even minor choices start producing stress. What to start, what to focus on, what matters today. Without external input, your mind feels blank, not calm, but stalled. That's not lack of intelligence. That's lack of exercised agency. The most damaging part is subtle. When outcomes go wrong, your brain doesn't learn, because learning requires ownership. If the decision wasn't yours, neither was the responsibility. Mistakes become meaningless, and success feels accidental. Motivation fades because nothing feels authored by you. Outsourcing decisions doesn't remove pressure. It transfers it to systems that don't care about your growth. And the more you rely on them, the harder it feels to decide alone. Independence begins to feel reckless instead of normal. But the moment you choose deliberately, even imperfectly, your brain lights up differently. Agency returns. Confidence grows from contact, not certainty. Decisions stop being threats and start becoming signals of identity. Helplessness weakens when your brain remembers one thing clearly. You are the one who chooses. Number 1. Training avoidance as intelligence. At some point, avoiding things stopped feeling like fear and started feeling like cleverness. You learned the language. That's not worth my energy. I'm just being selective. I know when something won't work. It sounds sharp, self-aware. But your brain is absorbing a dangerous lesson. Avoidance equals wisdom. His is how helplessness evolves its final disguise. The brain rewards avoidance when it reduces effort, uncertainty, or emotional risk. Each time you don't try and nothing bad happens, your nervous system logs it as a successful strategy. Over time, effort itself starts to feel inefficient, even foolish. Why struggle when you can step back and call it insight? The problem is that intelligence was never meant to eliminate effort. It was meant to direct it. But when avoidance is consistently framed as being smart, your brain stops distinguishing between discernment and fear. Both feel identical. Both reduce discomfort, and discomfort is what the brain is most motivated to escape. Gradually, curiosity fades. Ambition becomes theoretical. You analyze instead of engage, observe instead of build, critique instead of create. From the outside, it looks like restraint. Internally, your brain is being trained not to participate, and a brain that doesn't participate slowly forgets how to try. The most dangerous part is identity. You stop seeing yourself as someone who does things and start seeing yourself as someone who understands things. Understanding feels safer than risking failure, but without action, intelligence stagnates. Insight decays into commentary. True intelligence tolerates friction. It enters uncertainty. It tests ideas in reality instead of protecting them in theory. When you choose engagement over elegant avoidance, your brain relearns courage disguised as effort. Helplessness thrives when avoidance feels smart. It collapses the moment action becomes your proof of intelligence.